because I know that my body is constantly evolving and rebuilding itself, even the bones and the tendons and the ligaments. Every cell in our body is constantly renewing itself. And so I'm using that plasticity, what we call the plasticity of the body, to rebuild it in a shape that's going to serve me, because I kind of want to do that, right? Now, here's the thing. Our brains have that same plasticity. We can rewire and reshape our brains, and we can use that plasticity of the brain to help us build the habits that we want, right? And how we do that is we do things over and over and over again until our bodies have the plasticity that they want. I might never get there to hero pose, by the way, but I'm giving it a go, and I'll explain how in a minute. But our brains are much more easily shaped into the kind of habits that we want. Much more easy to shape your brain and rewire that than it is to rewire your knee joints and your hip joints, I could tell you. And the thing is that once you've rewired your brain to a healthy habit, like an exercise habit or like healthy eating, it doesn't take any motivation. It doesn't take any motivation once you've got that habit. You just keep doing it. And so there's this old saying, train the body, the mind will follow. It's not about training the mind and then getting the body fit, right? So all that stuff you've heard about willpower, you need to forget it. It's not about willpower. Willpower doesn't work. So let's get back to hero pose. I'm training myself to sit back and get my butt to my heels. You want to know how? Well, I'm going to tell you anyway. I found some old telephone books. Does anyone know what a telephone book is? It's kind of like a boomer thing or a Gen X thing, right? And it's a thing with, does anyone know what a landline is? That's kind of a boomer and a Gen X thing too. So telephone books were these big, thick books that had landline numbers in them, right? So we're going way back here, okay? Forget about smartphones. They didn't exist. They're really thick. These Los Angeles is a doozy, I can tell you. Los Angeles from the 1980s, what a doozy of a telephone book. It's like yay thick, okay? So I found some old telephone books and I put them between my heels and then I rest my butt back on them so that my butt sits up about 5 centimeters higher than the tops of my heels, okay? And I do that. It's not comfortable, but it's kind of, you know, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but I do that 15 minutes for most days, right? And I do it the next day, and then I do it the next day. But here's the twist. And the twist is this, right? Every day, I tear a single page out of that telephone book. Every day, I tear one page out of the telephone book. So I'm a little bit closer to my heels. Do you want to know how thick a page of a telephone book is? It's 0.075 millimeters, okay? So that's less than 0.1 of a millimeter thick. But every day I'm getting less than 0.1 of a millimeter closer to my heels. So I've done the calculation, and I figure if I keep doing this, then in about 968 days, my butt will reach my heels. 968. So it's still achievable. It's still achievable. So here's the first tip. If you want to develop an exercise habit, don't set the goal of running a marathon. Don't say you're going to dance like Beyonce. I hope I got that pronunciation right. My daughters keep telling me off every time I try and say her name because I get it wrong. But you need to break it down to a tiny little goal, a tiny little goal. And somebody, if you've seen the YouTube clips that we put up on this topic on the Ignite platform, for those of you who can get to the Ignite platform, there was a great presentation by a woman called Christine. She said, be spectacularly average. Aim for spectacular mediocrity. And that breaks your goal down to a tiny little goal. Don't aim for greatness because you won't get there. You'll get discouraged. But if you're spectacularly average every day, and that happens again and again and again, after 963 days, you might, like me, get your butt to your heels, or whatever your goal is. Okay, so second key point, what is exercise anyway? Well, if you can't do it, hero pose, putting your butt on your heels, is exercise. If you can do it, doesn't count, sorry. But if you can't, then it counts as exercise, okay? Because you're pushing yourself and moving yourself in a certain direction that is maybe beneficial for you, okay? What else is exercise? Well, running an ultra marathon is exercise. Riding across the USA on a push bike in under 9 days with 1 hour's sleep every night, that's extreme exercise, okay? Those are really extreme examples, so we're going to put them to one side. They don't really count. They're not for you and me. What about playing for Manchester United, like Ronaldo? What about playing for the All Blacks, like Beauden Barrett? Is that exercise? Well, some people might say it's stardom, but let's just call that some form of exercise, and it's pretty elite level exercise. What about playing golf? Actually, I'm not sure about this one. A lot of people go off to play golf and they do a lot of talking and stuff. But anyway, I think it's some form of exercise. And we call these forms of exercise football, rugby, golf, tennis, whatever, sport. We call them sport. So sport is a form of exercise. But what about going to a yoga class? It's not a sport. Going to an F45 class. I guess you've heard of F45. That's not a sport. CrossFit isn't a sport, but they are exercises, right? Who's got a smartphone here? I guarantee if we ran that poll, Marissa, we'd probably get about 100%. Yeah. So has anyone got steps on their phone? Yeah, I've got steps on my phone and it's not flash at all. It's like a cheap Oppo thing. And but it tells me the steps that I'm doing, okay? Steps are exercise. Do you think your body cares where you get your steps from? Do you think it cares whether you get your steps from running or whether you get it from hanging your clothes out on the clothesline, right? So we've got a clothesline, and so I go and hang my clothes on the clothesline, right? And problem is we don't have one of those nice little baskets with the laundry basket in, so I can wheel that down to the clothesline. So being a guy who can't multitask, I put all the washing on the deck, right? And then I go and get a pair of underpants, and then I walk back to the clothesline, I peg that on, then I walk back to the deck, right? And I get the next pair of underpants, and I walk back to the clothesline, I peg that on, and so on and so forth. You know, it takes me 1,000 steps just to hang the clothes out. But do you think my body cares where I got that 1,000 steps from? For all it knows, I might have gone out and done some sprints. But the reality is I was putting the clothes out. So the point here is that your body or your phone doesn't care where you get your steps from. So start by reframing the things that you're already doing if you want to get an exercise habit. Look at where you're getting your steps already and just build on that. That is exercise. It's not about running a marathon. Maybe you might want to aim for 10,000 steps a day, but if that's too far, aim for 1,000. You know what? If I can do 1,000 steps hanging the washing out, so can you. You could probably do 1,000 steps moving from the couch to the fridge several times, right? But then the next week, you could probably double that to 2,000 steps, and you might have to go down to the mailbox, right? So build on what you're already doing rather than set really, really high goals and be outstandingly average every day, my friends. You will succeed. You will succeed. Forget about greatness. Aim for being outstandingly average. What about walking to school? What about walking the dog? I guess a lot of people have got dogs these days. Walking with a friend, and we'll come to that in a moment. Riding a bicycle. Parking your car 2 blocks away from work because you can't get a park closer, and then you walk that extra block. That is exercise. These things are called activities of daily living, and they count as exercise. And if you turn them into habits, you're on the way to an exercise goal. Now, my second point here is motivation doesn't matter. Remember, I said it doesn't matter what you think. Change doesn't depend on what you want. It doesn't care if your doctor told you to get more active. It doesn't care that you want to get into that wedding dress and, you know, lose some few pounds or whatever. It doesn't care about anything in your head. You can't use willpower or reason to develop a habit. It depends upon this ability to be wildly unambitious and outstandingly average, okay? Aim for small successes. And the other thing that it depends on is that you've got to allow yourself to fail, because some days you will fail. I guarantee it. I can give you this firsthand. Some days you just can't be bothered. Another day, if you live in Auckland, your basement might be flooded, and it might stop you from playing tennis if you're the man. Another day, maybe you're in Christchurch and your chimney falls down because there's a bit of an earthquake, right? And those things are going to stop your exercise, okay? But the point being that if you let them derail your exercise because you say, I failed because, I just haven't done my exercise that day, you will fail and not build up that habit. So you have to allow yourself to fail. I went away to Mount Maunganui over the holidays, right? And some days I didn't practice my hero pose, getting my butt to my heels, right? And if I'd said, okay, that's it, I'm going to pack up because I failed, I didn't do it every day, then I would have called myself a loser and said, I'm never going to get there, and that would have been the end of the habit, right? But I didn't. Do you know what I did instead? When I got back home, I put a few pages of newsprint back into the telephone book. So I went back up a few 0.01 of millimeters, right? Just to be easy on myself. And then I got back into it, kept going, and now I'm ahead again. So next point, change is really, really hard, really, really hard. So how are we going to have to do it? We're going to have to rewire our brains. And I talked about this brain plasticity. We're going to have to rewire our brains if we're going to get a habit. And the way we do it is we use some hacks and some cheats. The first thing is you've got to get social with them. So don't just do it alone. Our brains crave company. We are social beasts. So get exercising with friends. We get more of a buzz when we exercise with friends because we've got that connection, okay? And so when we get the buzz, we associate the exercise with the connection. So if walking is your thing, walk with friends. If you're going to take up running, then take up running with a friend, whatever it is. Bonding feels good. And having that social support can help your habit keep going because your friends are going to keep you honest. Okay, which brings me back to a barrier. You will have some obstacles. There will be things in your way, and one of them is the company that you keep. So think very carefully about the company you keep. If you're trying to develop a healthy habit like exercise, and your friends, the only way you get together with your friends is over a drink or over food, then maybe you might need to expand your circle of friends or find the ones in there that have the similar goals. Okay, so this is where the social connection helps. Now, last tip, going to move on. Set yourself some SMART goals. So by SMART, I mean make them specific, make them measurable, make them achievable, make them realistic, and put a time frame on it. So I'm going to give you an example of a SMART goal and a not SMART goal. Okay, not SMART goal. I'm going to dance like Beyonce. I'm going to dance like Beyonce. All right. I count dance as exercise, by the way, just in case you hadn't noticed. That's not a SMART goal because it possibly is really, really, really ambitious, depending upon what you think of Beyonce's dancing. I know some people who don't rate it that high, but most people do. All right. It is not particularly measurable because who's going to be the judge of that? Are you going to go on some kind of Dancing with the Stars to figure that out? It's not hugely realistic because she's got lots of professional choreographers and coaches and fitness trainers and all sorts of stuff. And I guarantee that most of us here don't have that. And lastly, it hasn't got a timeline for it. Okay, so here's an example of a SMART goal. I'm going to go to the social salsa dancing lesson at 7:30 next Tuesday at the local bar where they hold it. In my case, it's called the backyard bar, right? And I'm just going to move my feet for an hour during that social lesson. So it's time bound. That's the T in SMART. I'm going to do it next Tuesday, right? It's realistic because I know where I'm going and how to do it. It's achievable because, hey, I can go there and there'll be other people kind of in the same situation and I'm sure I'll be able to follow the instructions. Do you get the idea? So that's a SMART goal, not I'm going to dance like Beyonce one day. Yeah. Lastly, before we wind it up, open it up to questions because I'm aware of the time. Think about apps. There are apps that can help you with this. There's a really good one called MyFitnessPal. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but check it out. And if an app's too much hassle and you want to spend less time on your phone, journal it, write it down, make a note of each time you exercise, look back at it each week, see how you were feeling. And that's a simple way of tracking your exercise goals. So there's a few tips. Rewire your brain, get smart, and just get out there and do it, and don't rely on the motivation. So that's it from me.